Greetings, YouTube. It's me once again, Charles King. All I can say is I'm truly thankful for all you guys have done for me. I never thought I was going to make it to at least 100 subscribers at this point. Hell, I didn't think I was going to make it far at all. And I gotta say, thank you for helping my channel grow, and I hope that we can push it even further in the future. Now, this episode, I'm going to be talking about one of my greatest artists of all time. You may know him better as Stan Lee. Now, while Marvel has been divided into three different companies over the years, such as Disney, Fox, and also Sony, there's one thing that's always been similar about his works. Stan Lee may have separated himself into different shows and parodies of himself, but one thing I know for certain is this: the charm never really died in all of them. Sure, there were a couple of bad decisions, like what happened with Fox when it came to the X-Men series and also with Fantastic Four. But we're not exactly going to dwell on the movie aspects completely today. We're going to look on some of the characters throughout his lifetime that really help define how humans see the world these days and possibly how we may see it in the future. So today, we're going to be looking at the legendary Stan Lee.
Yeah.
Oh, it's Stanley. Try it's my man Stanley.
Oh yeah, it's my man Stanley.
Welcome to Stanley's world. It's Stanley. Come help him figure out what life is all about. Who takes you swimming with dolphins? It's Stanley.
Oh yeah.
Laughs with the lion too. It's Stanley. Cool. No problem Stan can solve. It's solving it involves having a friend like you. Having a friend like you.
It's Stanley. It's Stanley. With a friend like you.
It's Stanley.
It's Stanley.
It's Stanley.
I hope you all enjoyed that intro. Anyway, listen up. The one thing that's always been fascinating about Stan Lee is that no matter whatever he's ever talked about, in one way or another, each one of us can take some real world aspect and implant it inside the comic books. The fact is, when we look at so many of them, it's not just about the superpowers or anything like that. It's how sometimes we can relate to the person that they're being written about. Like, one of the most predominant characters, whenever you think of Marvel, is definitely going to be Spider-Man. The whip, the whip. The thing that's always been interesting about Spider-Man is that what most people never realize is that he's a representation on what really would be like if a person ever really just instantly gained superhuman abilities. Because when we look at some of these people, we got like Captain America, we got Batman, we got Iron Man. But the funny thing that we always know about most superheroes is that not every of them is not always a teenager and is still living at their parents' house. You see, with Spider-Man, he had many odd jobs before he ever really gained anything in the world. And the fact is, he was basically a genius, but he didn't have the backing like most people did. So that's why it took him a long time before he was able to make it to where he is today. Now, most people always know that Spider-Man is well known for being a photographer at the Daily Bugle. Now, the interesting thing about Spider-Man working at this right here is actually representation of one of the things that Stan Lee did. You see, he didn't always really grow up into the life of fame and fortune it is. In fact, there's a key reason why he always represented Spider-Man more of himself than most people. See, there are a couple of characters in the comic books which took a lot of his real world experience from and that he used in order to create some of his characters. Like, he actually, from what I gather, I think he actually had a job as an assistant at a local magazine. Nice thing I also know about it is this: the parallels with Spider-Man and other comic book heroes who had odd jobs like this is basically showing what it's like saying that never forget when you have humble beginnings in this life. Because you see, eventually, Spider-Man in some comic books went on to be a multi-billionaire, rivaling even Iron Man. Because just like in the comic books and also in the movie, Spider-Man did take over Tony Stark's company. And the fact of the matter is, he went down from pretty much having nothing out there to becoming one of the most richest men in the world. Now, the next character we're going to take a look at is Captain America. That's right, the Star-Spangled Man with the plan. But I digress. You see, in the Captain America movie, there's actually something I never really paid attention to earlier. When I first saw the movie, I had no idea what I was really seeing inside there. You see, there's actually a scene inside there. If you pay close attention to it, you'll see a man in a glass jar that actually has two parallels between both Fantastic Four, the movie, and actually even Captain America. You see, the the being we see inside of that tube would have been known as the first Human Torch. That's right, the Human Torch that we know in most movies and cartoons was not the first Human Torch. The first Human Torch was actually an android, parallel in certain ways to Red Tornado inside of DC Comics. Now, here's where that's a double meaning inside the movie. When we see that this new guy who's supposed to be playing the new Captain America and everything like that, you see, he once played the Human Torch back in 2005's Fantastic Four, and now years later he ends up going on to play Captain America. So it's both a reference to the fact that this is a representation of the first Human Torch in both the comic books and also parallel in the movie because before Chris Evans went on to play Captain America, he once played the Human Torch. Said from before, when you look at this image inside of Captain America, the first Avenger, not many people realize the double entendre meaning with this character. Like I said, in the comic books, this character would have been known as the first Human Torch, and as I stated, that he is actually fully an android. But unlike the Human Torch that we know later on in the Fantastic Four, his power doesn't actually work the way how most people think. You see, he couldn't actually originally control the ability. You see, it was actually what it was composed of that actually led to his powers. You see, whenever he was exposed to oxygen, it would cause him to spontaneously combust. That's why he was actually placed underground for not only his own personal safety, but for just about anybody in general around him. And years later, he actually gets freed and actually causes a little bit of trouble with understanding about the difference between good and evil. And just like with like I mentioned before, he was has parallels to Red Tornado. The fact is, he kind of had a Pinocchio complex as well, when he had to really distinguish on how to do things, whether for good or evil. And also, along with Red Tornado, he eventually also got a sidekick, but in his case, he was actually human. But due to constant exposure that his mother had when she was pregnant with him when they were composing this version of the Human Torch, well, let's just say it had quite an interesting side effect on her. And I think she actually passed away due to that exposure, but they went on to be one of the greatest teams of all time. But I did notice a couple of similarities on how the story ended, kind of like how when Captain America fell into that icy cold water and also along with his pal Bucky. Next thing I also like on Marvel is like how they pass on their mantles over time. You see, like when I said, eventually like Spider-Man would take over for Tony Stark, there have been other characters to take over for Spider-Man as well. Like there in certain comic books, he passes on the mantle of Spider Hero to his daughter, who would be sometimes known as Spider Girl or Spider Woman, depending on which story you're actually reading from. There are other storylines where Spider-Man would die and then Miles Morales would take over. And the thing I always like best about some of these stories is that they would try and find out a worthy way to make sure that their successors would always try to live up to those standards, to make sure that they can actually follow properly in the footsteps of their predecessors before them. And I gotta tell you, when you look at certain ways on how they're actually portrayed in movies, it doesn't quite have the same type of impact because they can't exactly portray everything inside the movies as they would inside the comic book. I always enjoyed Captain Marvel inside the comic books. And I'm not talking about the Miss Marvel character that we know. I'm talking about the original one before that. Here, all right, no, sorry. Here's where his story comes from. You see, he's known as a Kree soldier. Kree have been in an everlasting war with another alien race known as the Skrull, shape-shifting creatures that have inhabited the Earth more times than one. Now, here's where things get interesting. You see, the Kree and the Skrull, like I mentioned, have been a pretty much endless battle trying to take over the universe itself. But they always saw in an ancient prophecy that for some mysterious reason, the Earth was a main focal point. Like whosoever would be able to take over the Earth will eventually help them win the war. But what they didn't know is that the Earth species had already been tampered with several times inside of its development. There was a group of creatures known as the Celestials who experimented on human DNA during the earliest days of mankind, which is actually why we got creatures like Marvel's mutants and other creatures that came along in future timelines. But you see, what they didn't know is that they didn't know that later on other races that they would experiment on would perform further experiments on these humans for their own benefit. For example, right now, you see, the Kree are the ones who invented the technology that would eventually cause the Inhumans to develop their powers. They wanted to use them as fire against the Skrull. Because you see, whenever an Inhuman gains their abilities, it doesn't always necessarily have the same side effect. You see, the reason why we get so many variants of the Inhumans is because see, each Inhuman was designed to infiltrate a different species across the galaxy. That's why there are so many different shapes and forms they take because they're not born by chance. Each one of them was specifically designed to inhabit a specific planet in order to infiltrate them so they can blend in with them in the background. Since they know the Skrull were shapeshifters, they always wanted to make sure that they would have their own creatures to fight against them. But the way how they did it inside the movie really hits me hard because basically in the comic books, neither the Skrull or the Kree are actual good guys. But I guess you can call the Kree the lesser of the two evils. And that's why I say that what they did in the Captain Marvel movie really took a shot in the dark. Because think about it. If we actually got it the way how it was supposed to be, we could have been looking into Phase 4 with so many unanswered questions. Questions, I mean, it could have led to a huge, huge bunch of possibilities. Now, I'm not sure exactly if they actually were planning on doing this at any time, but because the Inhumans TV show, which originally was going to be a movie itself, went down the drain, it actually could have led to a huge chain of events. For example, right now, like I said, all of them were basically interconnected. First, we got the Captain Marvel story, then the Miss Marvel would have come along, then the Inhumans, and they would have gotten the Skrulls. They could have been the next lineup for Phase 4 altogether. Because when people saw Avengers Endgame, people were suspecting if Scott Lang, who was Ant-Man at the time, could have actually been a Skrull in disguise. Because see, when the Skrulls appeared in some of the stories, it was part of something called Secret Invasion. I'm not 100% sure when it started, but what I do know is this. It's where for years, we find out for years that several of the comic book characters we've been following along all this time were not who we thought they were. The Skrulls had secretly infiltrated the Earth and then had been replacing heroes left and right all over the place. Because you see, we never knew who was who inside the story and who we could trust. But you see, that's where Captain Marvel's movie could have all led up to. If it had actually been portrayed properly and securely, we could have had the next 4 movies all lined up for us because remember, the world's in turmoil right now. So we've already lost a number of heroes at that. So we have no idea who's really going to be able to take over at that point right there. So like I said, we could have actually kept the original story where the Skrulls are actually infiltrating the Earth right now, and the fact is we have no idea who's who. And please, I'm not talking about what they did at the end of the Spider-Man Far Away From Home thing. That was a pretty weak ending to try and say that there's Skrulls on Earth because it just didn't really feel genuine. I mean, think about it. What if it actually was like that? What if we didn't know just who was who and who we could trust? No one on Earth really know who the Skrulls were and who weren't the Skrulls. So think about that in that sense right there. We could have had 4 movies all put up right in front of us if it had just been properly done. I mean, Captain Marvel movie, it just didn't really feel real. It almost felt kind of woke in certain manners. Because you see, Miss Marvel, she got her powers from the original Captain Marvel. That was his name. I know, pretty ridiculous code name. His name is Marvel, and his code name is Captain Marvel. I know it's lame, but you see, the reason why she took the mantle of Captain Marvel is in order to honor the fallen Captain Marvel. Because you see, at one point when he died in the comic books, she ended up eventually taking his name because she wanted to honor his memory because she actually reformed his heart. Because, like I said, he was a Kree soldier. So when he came down to the planet, it was she that changed his mind from going through with his mission and eventually became a hero that fall and she would take up the mantle. But no, they decided to say it's called a cockpit for a reason, lady. Seriously, why is it that they think that we have to try and make it seem like every woman is a victim? Captain Marvel and Miss Marvel had the greatest dynamic when it came to that type of thing right there, because she wanted to honor her fallen comrade. She helped stop an alien invasion not by power or by force, but by actually reforming a person's heart. And when you take it and try and make it into this whole women need to be strong thing, it just kind of destroys the whole meaning behind it. You guys had the opportunity to set up four straight instant movies that could have been right there after the Avengers Endgame, but no, you had to make it this whole cockamamie story about women's empowerment and also racism and immigration. The fact is, those key notes were already in there because the Inhumans were shunned by other human society because when they were experimented on, they gained massive intelligence and other abilities aside from what they would get from their experiments that would give them powers. So I know I have conditions that caused me to be a social outcast up until this very day. I've got something they call foreign accent syndrome. Despite me talking like this, people don't know that I'm actually Jamaican. In fact, I've been shunned in Jamaica for pretty much my entire life. So that's why I looked at the Inhuman story, the X-Men story, and also most definitely the Inhuman story because it's all about people who just want to fit in but never really got that opportunity. So you guys really blew it big time on this. I don't know if it was either an executive's idea or I don't think Stanley really would have wanted it that way because he pretty much passed away when the Captain Marvel thing was coming around. Because if the Inhuman story had been set up properly, you could have had the Captain Marvel movie set up properly. You could have had the Inhumans more set up properly. You could have the Skrulls set up properly, the Kree, and so many other adventures that would come along the way. We're going to get to one of my favorite characters of all time in Marvel, the Hulk. That's right, Hulk smash! But anyway, you see, the interesting about the Hulk is this. He's actually a combination of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde and also the Frankenstein's monster. The Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde comes in with a very important complex. Do we truly know who we are in this life? What we know on our exterior, do we know if that's how we feel on our interior? Not always. You see, what Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde was supposed to represent is that we all can have our inner voices, our id, as we would call it, where we may not always necessarily be betrayed on the outside as we feel on the inside. And that's where Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde came in. You see, the Hulk was never actually the Hulk. The Hulk actually didn't even exist. What most people think is that the Hulk itself is always a complete separate entity from Bruce Banner, but that's not completely the case. You see, the truth is, the reason why Bruce is actually like that in the Hulk form is because of the fact that he has multiple personality disorders. Mostly because, hey, look, he didn't exactly have a happy life growing up. I mean, his dad beat the shit out of him constantly as a kid and brutally murdered his mom right in front of him. So, hey, I wouldn't be surprised if he developed a couple of neurological disorders. But I digress. Now, here's where the Frankenstein's monster part comes in. You see, Frankenstein, whenever people always saw the Frankenstein's monster, is that they would instantly. But the fact is, he never actually hurt anybody. They just instantly saw him and cast judgment on him because of his circumstances of being. But he never actually hurt anybody. In most cases, he couldn't even speak. But that's just how it is sometimes in the real world. people always cast judgment before they take 2 seconds to even look at the character. They just look on the exterior and instantly go with destroy, destroy, destroy. But hey, I digress. See, that's where things came in. You see, where the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde came in is that it would make the darkness that exists inside of him be on the exterior, just like how it is with Frankenstein. They're seeing what's inside of him. All that literal, bottled up rage taking on the form that we see today. Because let's think about this. Yes, there have been other characters that have come along and have taken up the Hulk mantle, but none of them have really ever gone berserk like the actual Hulk. Because every second of every day, Bruce Banner always had regret in his heart, and that's why when we saw him, he would be looking appearing like a mindless monster. But that wasn't the case. Secretly, deep down, he was beating up himself constantly because if he truly wanted to be able to gain control of the Hulk, he would have to accept the fact that there is no Hulk. He's just him. He just didn't want to accept it that way. That's why the Hulk always appeared to have a mind of its own. And the next thing I always found interesting about the Hulk is that just like with Superman, his cousin would later on come to assist him in the same manner. You see, remember, Superman had like Supergirl in order to help him out inside the story, and she was his cousin from Krypton. Now, when it comes to the Hulk, he had She-Hulk. She was his cousin and a very successful lawyer. Now, the thing I always found interesting about She-Hulk is that she was better described to help break the narrative on what we're saying with weak women. And I don't just mean because she became Hulk strong, was because she was already a strong person before she even gained Hulk's powers. All right, she was already a successful lawyer before the Hulk actually even showed up at her doorstep. But that's just it, because she was such a successful lawyer, people would want to try and take her out of business because she'd be helping put away really, really bad people. In fact, that's where her story came up. You see, one day when Bruce came to visit her, some mobsters actually came up to try and silence her, and she ended up getting shot, and Bruce had to give her an emergency blood transfusion in order to save her life, which gave her her Hulk powers. Now, like I said, she's like one of the other people who would also take the Hulk mantle whenever he disappeared or something happened to him to put him out of commission for a while. In fact, she would actually go on to temporarily take the place of the Thing in the Fantastic Four. And trust me, I always loved seeing her inside there. But back to her story right now. See, just like what I mentioned before, she got the Hulk's powers, and yes, she did tap into a bit of rage in order to turn and stay in Hulk form, but that's just it. She was almost completely conscious when she was in Hulk form, because yes, it can be triggered by adrenaline and certain other strong emotions, but the fact of the matter is she knows who she is at the end of the day. She's been through trauma. I mean, she just nearly got killed on her own doorstep, but she was still able to stay in control. In fact, there are some comic book panels will actually even show her doing her regular day job as a lawyer while in She-Hulk form, and goddamn did it look impressive. The thing I always liked about the She-Hulk is that she actually helped break one of the most ridiculous narratives I hate about in this world. A man has sex with 100 women, he's instantly going to be declared as a stud. But if a woman has sex with 100 men, she's instantly going to get slut shamed. And I don't believe in any of that crap. Okay? Now look, I'm not telling people should keep on going around hooking up with random people over and over again. But you cannot cast judgment like that. You know, I've been in relationships before, and I've given women free range in order to go out there and explore things as well too. All I ask is that they're being a little bit respectful, like to wear protection, and if they are going to do that, don't bullshit me or anything like that. Please do not bullshit me. And the thing is, she actually even asks Tony Stark this same question after they've done doing a bit of smashing of their own. Why is it that men are held up to this standard if they have sex with 100 women, but a woman is held to by different standards by having sex with men? And I like her the fact that she could actually explore her sexuality like anybody else should, and I'm really happy with that because the fact is, she said that maybe I want to try this guy, maybe I want to try that guy, or who knows what else. But that's what always made her an interesting character. Now, I saw an image the other day where they're trying to redesign her character, and dear God, does it look horrific. It completely goes against what the original She-Hulk represented. I mean, it wasn't like she was overly sexy in certain cases. She just happened to have a really fit, athletic build. Because when you see women sometime in the Olympics, that's essentially what they look like. They still have their feminine features, but they are toned and look more tougher. But this doesn't look feminine in any way whatsoever. Let me see if I can gather this correctly. They say they want more female representation, yet they keep on making female characters look more and more like men. So tell me something. How are they supposed to feel represented if the fact is you can't even draw feminine bodies anymore? I ask, what the hell is this? What the hell is this? Okay, folks, this this is not She-Hulk, okay? This is She-Hulk. This is She-Hulk. Not this, but this. I don't know why on earth they think that drawing a character looking like this is gonna attract anybody. Okay, all the people who actually sponsor the comic books, who watch the films, play the video games, and take time to understand the backstory of each one of these characters, and trust me, there's a lot to pick from because, hey, everybody's gonna find somebody loving a Marvel comic book character. But the point is this. Who's gonna ask for this? Who was demanding to redraw She-Hulk like this? Was it in high demand? I would really love to see the statistics. No, I would beg someone to show me the statistics where people are begging to draw her looking like this. Does this even look like She-Hulk to you? No, it does not. It looks like Hulk if he just decided to take on a more Native American style. No one could honestly believe that that is She-Hulk. There's no bust line, no feminine features whatsoever. So let me get this straight. You're claiming that this is going to be a new look for She-Hulk, but was anybody asking for it? I'm literally begging you, folks. Show me where the demand was to make She-Hulk look like that. I mean, seriously, this is.
How's this? Hot stuff.
One of the reasons why I want people to pay attention to all this is because I've been hearing rumors saying that they're going to be making a live action version of the She-Hulk character. And from what I can gather, they're going to try and put in some of the same bullshit inside of that show too. I mean, seriously, please, I'm begging you, don't fuck up She-Hulk. She's always been one of my favorite female characters, and I would really hate to see them drag her name through the mud. I mean, she's always been like the voice of reason whenever she was on a team with her cousin. And the fact is, I would hate to see them ruin her good name. Seriously. Seriously, seriously. Anyway, I'm going to wrap this up right here. But before I go, we're going to discuss one more character that really ever spoke to me when paying attention to the world these days. Prominent characters known as the Black Panther. You see, the Black Panther character has many parallels to Batman. For example, the fact that he is vastly wealthy, has incredible martial arts skills, greatly intelligent, and also has a symbol of an animal using to represent his nature. Except in his case, he's not exactly afraid to put you down. Now, I really enjoyed how they managed to play off him with the brilliant actor Chadwick Boseman inside of the Black Panther movie because Chadwick Boseman was an actor who really committed to a role. Like when he, for example, when he played the first black person playing Major League Baseball, Jackie Robinson in a previous film, he really committed to the role and you could actually feel his anger inside there. You know, he's playing a character, you can actually feel the pressure of being a black man who's now being allowed to play Major League Baseball. Anywho, the interesting thing I enjoyed about the movie is that they weren't afraid to introduce some of the tones, like how African Americans are feeling these days when some of their ancient artifacts are acquired by museums and aren't exactly telling them the full detail behind them. But I'm not here to really get into all of that right now. What I'm getting at is this. Some people were saying that the reason why this script wasn't so well was the cousin angle didn't quite feel appropriate because we saw them building up Ulysses Claw throughout a few movies before, and yet he was just pretty much played off altogether in the film. Now, in the comic books, Black Panther has had quite a long battle going on with Ulysses Claw. In fact, he was actually one of the people who aided in the murder of his father and wanted to take up the Black Panther mantle in the first place. So the fact that he wasn't actually taken really seriously in this movie really kind of struck it down. Some people are saying that if they actually went that way, it would kind of bring up the whole classic blacks versus white type of debate in these movies. But what most people realize that's actually one of the details in there because his name is actually, I think he's actually based on one of the people who were in the Civil War who actually oppressed blacks. Now, again, I'm not exactly going to say I really want to get into details about that, but it actually made more sense because he's actually been a more longer standing villain than the cousin angle came up from. I think he actually was inside the comic books, but Ulysses Claw was kind of where it really all started at. It's kind of like when people are complaining about, well, it looks like we had a build up coming up to the Oh yeah, to the Mandarin. That's right, the Mandarin. Because in the original Iron Man movie, this guy looked like he was building up to actually be the Mandarin, and then he was completely played off by Howard Stane, and then after that, now we got a new guy taking on the mantle who just blew it in Iron Man 3. But I digress. The main point is this: this movie itself. A lot of people brought up a lot of hype about it, and it did live up to some of it with the special effects. My story wasn't exactly what I thought it would be. But I'm not really here to fully talk about that. What I am nervous about is this. Sadly, as we all know, Chadwick Boseman passed away in 2020. May he rest in peace. And it looks like they might be going to rework the sequel to the movie where his sister may be the one taking up the Black Panther mantle. And I'm actually okay with that because in the comic books, there was a time when he did pass on the mantle to his younger sister, and I was all for it. But then comes now with this controversy because the actress who played his sister, was a bit nervous about them coming up with the vaccine for the COVID thing and everything like that. And people are instantly going to classify her as an anti-vaxxer. Now, I myself will definitely be taking the vaccine when it becomes available in my country, but a lot of people are coming down on this woman right here, all because the fact is she said she was a bit nervous about it. They keep on twisting her words and making her feel guilty, but the fact is that wasn't the case. Now, with every new science and every new form of technology, there always comes risks, and sometimes the risks don't always outweigh the benefits. And maybe she's a bit nervous because she could wonder what could happen if somebody could have an adverse reaction to this new drug. And it might not necessarily be the case, but she's just nervous about it. And who isn't? It's kind of like when you're a kid about to ride your tricycle for the first time. You might not necessarily ride successfully, but you pick yourself up and try to keep on riding. But the fact is, you might not, that might not always be the case. Sometimes when you trip, you get hit hard, and you might not be able to get up as easily. And that's all what she's trying to say right there. And I really hate how people are coming down on her like that. This whole cancel culture thing has gotten way out of hand. Because that's basically what this whole thing is going about. They keep on twisting things and changing things to fit this narrative, and I don't know why. Redesigning characters and nobody asked for it. Changing stories when nobody asked for it. And shaming people for the most minute detail and so forth. The fact is, they're not actually listening to the people who are even paying for their merchandise, their books, their movies, or anything. They're just pandering to the people who keep on saying they want this, they want that in their books or the movie, but do they ever actually come to support the film? No. Do they come to buy the books? No. They don't support the media, and yet they keep on pandering to them. As to why, I may never know. Folks, I'm going to call it a night right now. Anyway, I hope you all enjoyed what I was able to talk about on here. Stan Lee may be gone, but his legacy will live on for many years to come. And I can honestly say, I was a true fan of his work. I love his movies, I love his cartoons, I love his TV shows and video games based off his work, and how they can apply in the real world in so many, many different ways when it comes to love, trust, honor, and even trying to live up to your standards or other people's standards. What really matters is that we all want to stick together inside this world. That's why he created many of these characters to signify unity, not separation. So please stop using them to do that. But let us not tarnish the name of Stan Lee. Let us look back, and also look to a bright new future and hopefully a bright new horizon. So on that note, I wish you all a pleasant good night, and Stan Lee, rest in peace.